sprawling Victorian home, steeling myself for another Sunday dinner of thinly veiled insults and not-so-subtle comparisons. My 10-year-old Toyota Corolla sat in the driveway, deliberately parked between my brother Mark's Mercedes and my sister Victoria's Range Rover. The car was my cover, just like the modest apartment I kept for family visits, the off-the-rack clothes I wore to these dinners, and the struggling programmer story I'd maintained for the past 6 years. Tonight all of that would change. Finally decided to grace us with your presence? Victoria opened the door, designer dress swishing. Her eyes swept over my simple blazer and slacks with practiced disdain. Still shopping at outlets, I see. If she only knew the simple blazer was a hand-tailored piece that cost more than her monthly mortgage. But that wasn't part of the story. Not yet. Inside, the familiar scene unfolded. Mom arranging flowers that cost more than they should, Dad holding court in his leather armchair, Mark showing off his new Rolex to his wife Jennifer. The perfect picture of upper-middle-class success. Olivia. Mom air-kissed my cheeks. We were just discussing Mark's new promotion. Senior Vice President. And Victoria's interior design business is simply exploding. That's wonderful, I said, taking my usual seat, the one with the wobbly leg they never fixed. Congratulations, Mark. He puffed up like a peacock. Well, some of us know how to climb the corporate ladder. Not everyone can be content with. What is it you do again? Coding in some startup. I hid my smile behind a sip of water. Some startup had just signed the final paperwork an hour ago. In exactly 47 minutes, the news would break. Speaking of careers, Dad interjected, Peterson's firm is still looking for IT support staff. Not much, but better than freelancing. Maybe you could finally afford a decent car. The TV hummed quietly in the background. NBC, Dad's favorite channel for tracking his modest investment portfolio. The same channel that would soon. I'm happy with my car, I said mildly. It gets me where I need to go. Victoria snorted. Yeah, to your shared workspace and rented studio apartment. Honestly, Olivia, when are you going to grow up and get a real job? Not everyone can have Daddy finance their business ventures, Jennifer added, adjusting her tennis bracelet, a gift from Mark, no doubt. Mom emerged from the kitchen with the roast, her Sunday dinner specialty. Now let's not criticize. Olivia is finding her way. At 32? Mark laughed. Come on, Mom. Some people just aren't meant for success. I checked my watch. 39 minutes. Well, I did have some news. I started. Please don't say you're still working on that app thing, Dad interrupted. How much money have you sunk into that pipe dream? The app thing was NextGen Solutions, the company I'd built from my dorm room coding project into a revolutionary AI platform. The company that had just... Actually, I tried again. There have been some developments. Oh God, Victoria groaned. Another Kickstarter? Remember her last one, Mark? What was it, $50 in pledges? The hidden Patek Philippe under my sleeve, a celebratory gift to myself, ticked steadily. 28 minutes. Speaking of money, Mom chirped, desperate to change the subject. Mark and Jennifer just put a deposit down on a vacation home in Aspen. And Victoria's looking at expanding her design firm to the Hamptons. Must be nice, Jennifer said with fake sympathy, watching everyone else succeed while you're still driving that. What year is your Corolla again? 2013, I supplied. It has character. Is that what we're calling poverty now? Mark snickered. Dad muted the TV for dinner, but I could see the financial ticker scrolling across the bottom. Any minute now. You know, Olivia, Mom said, passing the potatoes, there's no shame in asking for help. Your father and I could. Still can't believe you wasted your trust fund on that tech nonsense, Victoria interrupted. At least I invested mine in something practical. The trust fund. Right. The same one I'd used as seed money for NextGen, turning that $50,000 into. Honestly, sis, Mark leaned forward, it's time to face reality. You're not cut out for the business world. Some people are meant to lead, others to follow. Nothing wrong with that. 10 minutes. More wine, dear. Mom offered, clearly trying to soften the blows. No thanks, I replied. I need to keep a clear head for later. Hot date. Victoria smirked. Let me guess, coffee shop barista? Or maybe another entrepreneur from your coding meetups. 5 minutes. Actually, I have a conference call with some investors, I said truthfully. Investors? Dad scoffed. In what exactly? Pie company. That app thing again? Mark rolled his eyes. Give it up, Olivia. Not everyone can be successful like. The TV suddenly blared to life. Dad had hit the wrong button on the remote while reaching for his wine. Breaking news, the CNBC anchor announced. In a shocking move, tech giant Megacorp has acquired NextGen Solutions for $2.1 billion in cash and stock. The AI startup founded by Olivia. The sound of shattering glass filled the room as Dad's wine glass slipped from his hand. What? Victoria whispered. The deal, the anchor continued, makes NextGen's founder one of the youngest tech billionaires in history. Analysts are calling this the acquisition of the year. My phone exploded with notifications. Emails, texts, calls, 6 years of carefully maintained secrecy shattering in an instant. The room had gone completely silent. 5 pairs of eyes stared at me in disbelief as I calmly reached for my phone. About those developments I wanted to discuss, I said softly. Should we talk about them now? The silence stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. Mom's hand trembled as she set down her fork, the silver clattering against fine china. The TV continued its relentless coverage, each detail making my family flinch. Sources say NextGen's revolutionary AI platform has been secretly powering major tech companies for the past 3 years. Estimated annual revenue of $300 million. Founder Olivia Wilson maintained complete ownership. Turn it off, Victoria whispered, but no one moved. My phone kept buzzing. I glanced at the screen calls from Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg. The carefully constructed walls of my private life were crumbling spectacularly. This is a joke, right? Mark finally managed, his face ashen. Some kind of elaborate prank. I pulled out my laptop, not the old model they were used to seeing but my actual work computer. Would you like to see the acquisition papers? But your apartment, Mom stammered. That terrible car. Covers, I said simply, opening files that showed my real estate holdings. Just like the shared workspace you mock, I actually own the entire building. That struggling programmer story was convenient. It let me see who people really were. Dad found his voice, anger mixing with confusion. You deceived us. Your own family. Did I? I turned to face him. Or did you deceive yourselves? Too busy assuming I was a failure to notice what I was building. Victoria jumped up, her chair scraping against the hardwood. All those times you couldn't afford to join us for vacations. I was usually in Silicon Valley meeting with investors. Or Tokyo, setting up our Asian headquarters. Or London, where I own a townhouse in Mayfair. I smiled. That coding meetup, last Christmas? I was closing a $100 million funding round. But why? Jennifer demanded. Why live like someone you could look down on? I finished for her. Because money reveals character. Both having it and thinking someone doesn't. My phone rang again, my actual assistant this time. Yes, Maria? Ms. Wilson, Megacorp's CEO, is ready for the press conference. And the NYSE wants to know about the bell-ringing ceremony tomorrow. Schedule it, I replied. And have the car brought around. The real one. The Bentley or the Aston Martin? I looked at Mark, who was still obsessively checking his Rolex. The Bentley. Mom started crying softly. All these years, we treated you like a disappointment? I supplied. Cautionary tale. The family failure. Dad stood up, straightening his shoulders. Now see here, young lady. Just because you've come into some money doesn't mean. Some money. I pulled up my real portfolio on my laptop. Would you like to see the numbers, Dad? The properties, the investments, the offshore accounts. Should we compare net worth? He fell back into his chair. Through the dining room window, I could see my driver pulling up in the Bentley, a far cry from the Toyota parked next to it. 6 years, I continued, closing my laptop. 6 years of watching you finance Victoria's failed business ventures while mocking my pipe dreams. 6 years of enduring Mark's condescending career advice while I was building a billion-dollar company. 6 years of Mom's pitying looks and Dad's disappointed lectures. We were trying to help, Mom protested weakly. No, you were trying to force me into your definition of success. Designer clothes, luxury cars, country club memberships, all funded by Dad's money or corporate jobs. Victoria wiped her mascara-streaked cheeks. So this was all some sort of revenge? Making us look foolish? No, I said softly. This was a lesson. About judgment, about assumptions, and about what really matters in life. My phone buzzed again, Maria reminding me about the press conference. Now if you'll excuse me, I stood up, smoothing my simple blazer. I have a company to take public. Wait, Mark called as I reached the door. All those times you asked for investment advice. I was studying you, I confirmed. Learning exactly what not to do with money. How not to let wealth define character. The Bentley's engine purred outside. Through the window I could see the neighbors gathering, pointing at the car, probably wondering about the commotion. One last thing, I turned back. That trust fund you all criticized me for wasting? I invested it in Amazon and Tesla back in 2016. Just that initial $50,000 is worth about $8 million now. But you were all too busy laughing at my tech nonsense to notice. Dad's face went from red to purple. 8 million. Amazing what happens when you actually understand technology and market trends instead of just bragging about your portfolio at dinner parties. I checked my watch. The press conference starts in an hour. Would you like to watch it here, or should I have Maria send you the highlights? The next morning I stood in front of the New York Stock Exchange surrounded by cameras and reporters. The simple blazer was gone, replaced by a Chanel suit that cost more than Victoria's monthly sales. My family watched from the crowd, Mom still shell-shocked, Dad attempting to look proud as if he'd supported me all along, Mark studying my every move like he was trying to decode a puzzle, and Victoria looked like her entire worldview had shattered. Ms. Wilson, a reporter called out, how does it feel to be the youngest female tech billionaire? I smiled, thinking of all the family dinners where they'd question my worth. Success isn't about age or gender. It's about vision and perseverance. Your family must be very proud, another suggested. I caught Dad trying to edge closer to the cameras. Actually, I built NextGen without family support. Sometimes the best motivation comes from people telling you what you can't do. The questions continued as I rang the opening bell. NextGen stock opened at $150, soared to $245 by noon. My phone showed notifications of congratulations from real tech leaders, people who'd known my secret all along, who'd respected my desire for privacy while building something revolutionary. During a break in the interviews, Victoria approached hesitantly. That apartment you live in is the smallest of the 6 properties I own in the city, I finished. The building itself is part of my real estate portfolio. And all those times you borrowed money for coding equipment. I was actually buying competitors. Small tech firms with promising AI patents. I adjusted my Cartier watch. No need to hide it anymore. That $2,000 I borrowed last year? I used it to test you. See if you'd lord it over me. You did, by the way. Mentioned it at every family dinner for 3 months. She flinched. Olivia, Save it, I cut her off. The time for apologies was during the 6 years you treated me like a failure, not now that you know I'm worth billions. Mark tried next, sliding into the conversation with his sales director smile. Sis, about those investment opportunities one mentioned. You mean the ones you said I was too stupid to understand? I checked my phone. NextGen stock now at $268. I had my team analyze them. Would you like to know why they all failed? He stepped back, facade cracking. Mom and Dad stayed on the periphery watching their perfectly ordered world realign. The daughter they dismissed as a disappointment was now worth more than their entire social circle combined. Ms. Wilson, Maria appeared with my tablet. The interviews are scheduled until 3 p.m., then you have the board meeting at 4. Also, Time magazine wants you for next month's cover. Thank you, Maria. And the other matter. He handed me a folder. The audit of your family's finances as requested. Everything from the last 10 years, investments, debts, hidden accounts. Dad's face went pale. You investigated us? Knowledge is power, I replied, scanning the documents. Like knowing that Victoria's design firm is 3 months from bankruptcy. Or that Mark's been falsifying his sales reports. Or that your investment portfolio isn't quite as impressive as you claim at country club dinners. You had no right. Dad started. I had every right. You spent years criticizing my choices while hiding your own financial troubles. The country club membership you can barely afford, the mortgages you can't pay, the credit cards you've maxed out trying to maintain appearances. Mom stepped forward, tears threatening her perfect makeup. We only wanted what was best for you. No, you wanted me to fit your image of success. Designer labels, expensive cars, a corporate job, all funded by debt and appearances. I closed the folder. I chose to build real wealth instead of looking wealthy. And now? Victoria asked quietly. Are you going to destroy us? Release those audits. I studied my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. Behind the designer dress and perfect makeup I saw fear. The same fear that had driven her to mock my choices, to prove her worth through spending and status. Actually, I said, I'm going to offer you a choice. Maria handed me another folder. Option 1. Continue as you are, maintaining appearances until it all collapses. Option 2. Let me help you build something real. Help us. Mark scoffed, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. NextGen is expanding. We need people in various positions, starting at entry level of course. Real work, not just titles and corner offices. I handed each of them a document. Complete transparency about your finances, commitment to actually learning the business, and most importantly, no more pretenses. Entry level? Victoria whispered, staring at the paper. But I own my company. A company that's about to fail, I reminded her. Sometimes success means starting over. I would know, you all watched me do it for 6 years. Dad stepped forward, his usual confidence gone. And if we refuse? Then nothing changes. You continue living beyond your means, hiding financial troubles, judging others based on appearances. But now you'll do it knowing that the daughter you dismissed as a failure could buy your entire social circle without noticing the expense. My phone buzzed, NextGen stock closing at $275, making my net worth well over $3 billion. You have 24 hours to decide, I said, gathering my things. Maria will show you out. Wait, Mom called. All those Sunday dinners listening to us, it must have been horrible. I turned back one last time. Actually, it was educational. I learned that true wealth isn't about what you own or what you wear. It's about what you build, what you learn, and most importantly, how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. The cameras flashed as I walked away, capturing the moment for tomorrow's papers. Behind me, I could hear Victoria crying softly, Mark arguing with Jennifer, Dad trying to maintain control of a situation long past controlling. But I didn't look back. 6 years of hiding my success had taught me everything I needed to know about them. Now it was their turn to learn about real value, real work, and the true cost of judging someone by their cover. My Bentley waited at the curb, but I walked past it to my old Toyota. One last lesson for my family. True confidence doesn't need to be displayed. As I drove away, Maria sent me their responses. All 4 had signed the agreements. Tomorrow they'd start at the bottom of my company, learning what I'd known all along. Success isn't about looking rich, it's about building something meaningful. And sometimes the best revenge isn't showing off your wealth. It's making others earn their own. With golden light from its signature Art Deco chandeliers, each fixture worth more than most people's cars and casting intricate shadows across the polished marble floors. Dad had spared no expense for his 60th birthday celebration, transforming the city's most prestigious event space into something worthy of a royal reception. White roses cascaded from towering centerpieces at every table, and a live jazz quartet played sophisticated melodies that floated through conversations peppered with the confident laughter of the city's elite. I stood quietly near the massive windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline 30 floors below, watching the celebration unfold around me like a scene from a movie I wasn't really part of. The guest list read like a who's who of the metropolitan area's most successful residents, prominent attorneys, influential politicians, wealthy real estate developers, and old money families whose names appeared on hospital wings and university buildings. Dad commanded the center of attention in his custom-tailored midnight blue tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled and his confident smile reflecting the satisfaction of a man who had built an empire from nothing. At 60, Vincent Castellano still possessed the kind of magnetic presence that made other powerful men seek his counsel. And tonight, surrounded by congratulations and admiration from 200 of his closest associates, He was absolutely in his element. 40 years in commercial real estate, he was saying to a circle of admirers, his voice carrying the authority that comes from closing billion-dollar deals. And I can tell you that success isn't about luck or timing. It's about vision, execution, and surrounding yourself with people who understand what it takes to build something lasting. My stepmother Patricia stood beside him like a perfectly polished accessory, radiant in her champagne silk gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. At 45, she had the kind of beauty that required significant investment to maintain, and every detail of her appearance, from her diamond necklace to her professionally styled hair, announced her status as the wife of one of the city's most successful men. My older half-brother Marcus dominated the conversation from Dad's right side, his voice carrying the confidence that comes from being groomed as the heir to a commercial real estate empire. At 28, he had already closed several major deals independently, and his success was evident in everything from his platinum cufflinks to the way other young professionals sought his attention. The Morrison Tower project brought in $12 million in commissions this quarter, Marcus announced, adjusting his Patek Philippe watch with practiced casualness. Sometimes I look at what we've accomplished and realize that most people simply don't have the intelligence or drive to operate at this level. His wife Sophia nodded enthusiastically, her designer dress and flawless makeup serving as testament to the lifestyle that Marcus's success provided. Exactly. It takes a special kind of vision to see opportunities that others miss. Not everyone can think on that scale. I continued sipping my champagne, Dom Perignon naturally because Dad never settled for anything less than the finest, and let their familiar boasts wash over me like expensive background music. They had no idea that the simple black cocktail dress I was wearing had been custom designed by the same fashion house that dressed tech moguls and hedge fund managers, or that the understated pearl earrings I wore were worth more than Marcus's monthly salary. Speaking of vision and long-term thinking, Dad's voice grew louder as he addressed the broader gathering. I want to take a moment to talk about legacy and what it means to build something meaningful that can be passed down through generations. The conversations around us quieted as Dad's authoritative voice commanded attention from across the elegant ballroom. Other guests turned their chairs to better observe the man whose success they all admired and hoped to emulate. When I started Castellano Properties 40 years ago, Dad continued, his tone taking on the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to addressing shareholders and industry conferences, I made a commitment not just to building wealth, but to creating a dynasty that would endure for generations. I wanted to establish something that my children could be proud of, something they could build upon. Patricia beamed at him with practiced adoration, her smile perfectly calculated to convey both love and pride without appearing too eager for the spotlight. Looking at Marcus, Dad went on, his pride evident in every word, I see that vision fulfilled. He's not just following in my footsteps, he's expanding our reach, innovating our approach and preparing to take Castellano Properties to even greater heights. Marcus straightened in his custom-tailored suit, clearly basking in the public acknowledgement of his achievements. Sophia squeezed his hand, her expression radiating the satisfaction that comes from being married to the family's golden child. Then Dad's gaze found me across the crowded ballroom, and I felt the familiar weight of his disappointment settling over the celebration like an expensive but suffocating blanket. And then there's Natalie, he said, his tone shifting subtly but unmistakably, the warmth draining from his voice like wine from a broken glass. My biological daughter, who at 26 continues to disappoint me with her lack of direction and her complete inability to understand what it means to be a Castellano. The words cut through the elegant atmosphere like a knife through silk, sharp and impossible to ignore. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes turning toward me, some sympathetic, others curious, a few probably grateful that their own family disappointments weren't being aired quite so publicly at such a prestigious event. Natalie refuses to join the family business, Dad continued, his voice carrying across the ballroom with the authority that made him one of the city's most respected businessmen. She lives in some tiny apartment downtown, drives a car that's older than some of our junior employees, and works on what she calls investment projects that no one in this room would consider serious business ventures. I could hear the soft murmur of conversations starting around the room as guests processed this unexpected turn in what was supposed to be a celebration. Patricia's expression remained perfectly composed, but I caught the flash of satisfaction in her eyes. She had always enjoyed these moments when Dad's disappointment in me became public knowledge. I've offered her every opportunity, Dad pressed on, apparently committed to making his disappointment a centerpiece of the evening's entertainment. Entry-level positions at the company, introductions to serious professionals, even funding for legitimate business ventures. But she insists on pursuing these fantasy projects that will never amount to anything meaningful. Marcus nodded approvingly, clearly enjoying his role as the successful son in contrast to my apparent failures. The real estate industry requires vision, capital, and professional connections, he added, his voice loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. It's not something you can just dabble in as a hobby. I set down my champagne flute and walked calmly toward the family's table, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The conversations around us grew quieter as people sensed that something significant was about to happen. Dad, I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush, I think there might be some misunderstanding about my work. He turned toward me with the kind of expression that successful men reserve for interruptions they consider unwelcome. Natalie, please don't embarrass yourself further by trying to defend whatever it is you think you've accomplished. This is my birthday celebration, and I won't have it disrupted by your delusions of success. I'm not here to disrupt anything, I replied calmly. I just thought you might be interested to know that your daughter has been somewhat more successful than you realize. Dad's laugh was sharp and dismissive, the sound carrying across the ballroom like broken crystal. Success? Natalie, you live in a studio apartment and drive a Honda that should have been scrapped years ago. That's not success, that's barely survival. The circle of guests around us had grown larger, drawn by the increasingly public nature of our family drama. I could see several prominent businesspeople in the crowd, including some whose names I recognized from the Forbes list of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out my phone, I think there might be some confusion about my living situation and business ventures. Dad's expression shifted from annoyance to something approaching anger. Natalie, I am not going to stand here at my own birthday party and listen to more of your fantasies about being a successful businesswoman. You're embarrassing yourself and this entire family. That's when he made the decision that would change everything. Security. Dad called out, his voice booming across the elegant ballroom and drawing the attention of every guest in the room. Security, remove my daughter from this event. She's disrupting the celebration and I want her escorted from the building immediately. The room fell completely silent except for the soft jazz music that continued playing, apparently unaware that the evening had taken such a dramatic turn. 200 of the city's most influential people watched as a uniformed security guard approached our table, his expression professional but clearly uncomfortable with the family drama he was being asked to manage. The security guard, a tall, well-dressed man who looked like he'd been working high-end events for years, walked directly toward me, his steps measured and polite. But as he got closer, his expression changed from professional courtesy to something approaching confusion. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, stopping just short of our table and speaking in a voice that carried clearly across the silent ballroom. "Are you Ms. Natalie Castellano?" "I am," I replied calmly. The security guard's entire demeanor shifted, his professional composure giving way to something that looked almost like deference. "Ma'am, I'm very sorry for the confusion, but you're the building owner. You're listed as the primary contact for all security matters in the Metropolitan Tower." The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the distant hum of the building's climate control system, the soft whisper of expensive fabric as people shifted in their seats, the barely audible sound of champagne bubbles rising in crystal glasses. Dad's face went from confident to confused to something approaching horror in the span of about 3 seconds. "What did you just say?" The security guard looked around the room, clearly realizing that he had just delivered information that was having a much more dramatic impact than he had anticipated. "Sir, Ms. Castellano owns the Metropolitan Tower. She purchased the building 18 months ago through her investment company, Meridian Holdings." "That's impossible," Dad whispered, his voice barely audible even in the complete silence of the ballroom. I pulled out my phone and opened the property management app that controlled every aspect of the building's operations. "Actually, Dad, it's quite true. I bought the Metropolitan Tower for $247 million in cash 18 months ago when the previous owners were facing bankruptcy." The number hung in the air like a revelation. $247 million. More money than most of the people in this room would see in their lifetimes, and I had used it as a single real estate transaction. The Metropolitan Tower is part of my commercial real estate portfolio, I continued, showing Dad the screen that displayed my property holdings. I own 12 commercial buildings across the city, including 3 of the properties that Castellano Properties manages for other investors. Marcus was staring at my phone screen, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. That shows a portfolio worth over $400 million. $437 million to be precise, I confirmed. Though that's just the real estate holdings. The total investment portfolio is somewhat larger. Patricia had gone completely pale, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the shock that was written across her features. How is this possible? You're 26 years old. I started investing when I was 18, I explained, addressing the entire ballroom since everyone was clearly listening anyway. I began with the trust fund that Grandma Castellano left me, $2 million that I used to buy my first property downtown. I've been building the portfolio ever since, reinvesting all profits and leveraging my existing holdings to acquire larger properties. Dad found his voice, though it came out rough with disbelief. You bought the Metropolitan Tower? This building. Among others, I replied. I also own the Harrison Center where your main offices are located, the Riverside Complex where Marcus and Sophia live, and the waterfront towers where Patricia's spa is located. The implications of that revelation began to sink in around the room. My family, the people who had been dismissing my success for years, were essentially my tenants. They lived and worked in buildings that I owned. The security guard, apparently realizing that he was witnessing something extraordinary, cleared his throat politely. Ma'am, should I escort anyone from the building or is everything resolved? I looked around the silent ballroom at the 200 guests who had just witnessed the most dramatic reversal of expectations any of them had probably ever seen, then back at my family's stunned faces. Actually, I said, turning to the security guard with a smile, I think we're fine. But could you please ask the building manager to come up here? I'd like to discuss some policy changes with the family. Of course, ma'am. Right away. As the security guard walked away, the silence in the ballroom gradually gave way to whispered conversations and the soft sound of people pulling out their phones, probably to verify what they had just heard or to share the story with people who hadn't been fortunate enough to witness it firsthand. Dad sat down heavily in his chair, his earlier confidence completely deflated. Natalie, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think that I was a failure? I finished gently. Because every time I tried to talk about my investments, you cut me off to explain why real estate required serious capital and professional connections. When I mentioned buying my first property, you told me I was wasting my inheritance. When I talked about expanding my portfolio, you said I was in over my head. I pulled out another document from my purse, the building management report that showed the monthly revenue from all my properties. After a while, I decided to let my results speak for themselves. The building manager, a distinguished woman in her 50s, approached our table with the kind of deference that successful property owners always received. Miss Castellano, you wanted to see me? Yes, Sandra. I wanted to introduce you to my family. They're tenants in several of our buildings, and I think it's important that they understand our building policies and rental agreements. Sandra smiled professionally. Of course. Is there anything specific you'd like me to review with them? Just the standard lease terms and our policy on events like this. Also, please make sure they have my direct contact information in case they need anything. As Sandra began explaining the building's policies to my visibly stunned family, I noticed that conversations throughout the ballroom had resumed, but with a decidedly different energy. People were approaching our table, introducing themselves and asking about investment opportunities. Mrs. Wellington from the City Planning Commission extended her hand with obvious respect. Miss Castellano, I had no idea you were the investor behind the downtown revitalization projects. Your work has transformed entire neighborhoods. Dr. Morrison from the Medical Center Board was right behind her. The medical plaza you developed has been absolutely transformational for our practice. We'd love to discuss expanding our lease. But the conversation that mattered most came when Dad pulled me aside as the evening was winding down. Natalie, he said quietly, his voice carrying none of the authority that had dominated the earlier part of the evening, I owe you an apology. More than an apology. I've been completely wrong about what you've accomplished. I know, I replied, giving him a hug that was long overdue. But maybe now we can start over. As equals. Equals. Dad looked around the elegant ballroom, my ballroom in the building that I owned. Sweetheart, I think you might be a little ahead of your old man at this point. Marcus joined us, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that looked like genuine respect. Natalie, I have to ask, would you consider letting me work with you? Because what you've built is exactly what I've been trying to learn how to do. Of course, I said, pulling out my business card. But you should know that my junior analysts start at entry-level positions, regardless of their last name. Marcus took the card with obvious relief. That sounds perfect. I think I have a lot to learn. As the celebration wound down and guests began to leave, many of them stopped to thank me for hosting such a memorable evening in such a beautiful venue. Several business cards were exchanged and I found myself with 3 new potential investment opportunities. But the moment that mattered most came when Dad stood up to make a final toast. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice carrying across the ballroom one last time, I need to make a correction to something I said earlier tonight. The room quieted, all attention focused on the man who had dominated the evening until his daughter had quietly demonstrated that success comes in many forms. I said that Natalie had disappointed me with her lack of direction and success. Dad continued, his voice strong despite the emotion I could see in his eyes. I was wrong. She hasn't disappointed me, she's amazed me. While I've been building a business, she's been building an empire. He raised his glass toward me, his expression carrying both pride and a humility I'd never seen from him before. To Natalie Castellano, property mogul, and the daughter who taught her father that sometimes the student becomes the teacher. The applause that followed was genuine and enthusiastic, and as I stood to acknowledge it, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong about your potential. Sometimes it's showing them that love and respect can transform any relationship, even when it takes owning the building to get their attention. The next morning, 3 major developers called to discuss partnership opportunities. Dad helped me schedule the meetings,